The storm had rolled in faster than Clara expected, though she wasn't sure why it surprised her anymore. Storms had been finding her for years, dark ones, the kind that uprooted a life more violently than any wind. First came the fever that took her husband so swiftly she barely had time to beg God to spare him. Then came the quiet, cruel truth the doctor delivered with sympathetic eyes: she would never bear children. In a town where families measured their worth by the size of their brood, where women were expected to fill cradles and future ranch hands were prized like gold, her barrenness marked her like a scarlet letter. The pity stung, the whispers stung worse, but nothing cut her as deeply as the day her late husband's brother, who'd inherited the land and house, looked her dead in the eye and told her she should move on for everyone's sake. Everyone's sake, as if her existence somehow harmed the world around her. So she packed what little she owned, a few dresses, her mother's Bible, and a locket containing a single faded photograph. With no family to turn to, no home to return to, Clara walked. She didn't know where she was going, only that it couldn't be anywhere she had already been. By afternoon, cold clouds had gathered over the plains, bruised and swollen with rain. The wind picked up, sharp and biting, tugging at her shawl and chilling her fingers until they ached. She kept walking anyway, step after trudging step, until the first icy raindrops splattered against her cheeks. Within minutes, the storm fully unleashed, sheets of frigid rain, slicing wind, blinding gray. Clara's teeth chattered uncontrollably. She scanned the horizon for anything that resembled shelter. That was when she saw it, a distant barn, slanted against the storm like an old soldier refusing to fall. A rough fence line snaked toward it, half collapsed in places, leading her along as though urging her forward. By the time she reached the barn doors, her skirts were soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, her shoes squelching with every step. She pressed a trembling hand against the wooden door and pushed. But before she could slip inside, a voice cracked through the storm. "That barn ain't for strangers." Her entire body went rigid. Through the curtain of rain, a tall figure approached. A rancher, broad shoulders beneath a dripping oilskin coat, worn boots sinking slightly into the mud, dark hair matted to his brow. His posture was steady, almost carved from the land itself. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of hard work and harder losses. His gaze landed on her, sharp, assessing, but not cruel. I'm sorry," Clara stammered, stepping back into the rain. "I didn't mean to trespass. I was only trying to get out of the storm. I'll leave, truly, as soon as it lets up." He looked her over slowly. Not in the way men sometimes looked at her with judgment or desire, but with a kind of cautious curiosity. He took in her soaked dress, the worn-out suitcase, the raw red of her hands, the way she shivered like a leaf trapped in a tempest. "You alone?" he finally asked. Clara nodded once. The rancher exhaled, a cloud of mist escaping his lips. "Name's Elias Prescott," he said, jerking his chin toward the house perched on a ridge above the barn. "I own this land." Clara swallowed hard. "I didn't mean any harm, sir." "You're freezing," he said simply. "Storms gettin' meaner by the minute. You stay out here, you won't last long." She blinked through the rain, confused. "Are you offering shelter?" Elias shrugged as if it were no big matter, though the slight softening of his eyes betrayed him. "Just till the storm breaks. My 4 young'uns are inside. They're wild as new pups, but they mind well enough. When I tell 'em, 4 children," her heart twisted, but she said nothing. Inside the house, warm lamplight flickered through fogged windows. Elias led her in, his boots thudding softly against the wood floor. The second the door shut behind her, a wave of heat washed over her. A large fireplace crackled in the main room, filling the house with the scent of burning cedar. Then she felt it, eyes on her. 4 children peered at her from various corners, the eldest boy leaning against the table, a girl with braids standing on tiptoe, and 2 younger ones huddled together near the fire. "Pa," the youngest whispered, "is she an angel?" Clara felt her breath catch. Elias cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "She's a traveler caught in the storm. Mind your manners." But the littlest girl's wide eyes never left Clara's face. Angel. It had been so long since anyone looked at her with wonder. So long since she'd felt anything but burdensome. Elias motioned toward the fire. "Sit. You look half frozen." Clara lowered herself onto the rug, warmth seeping slowly back into her bones as the storm thundered outside. For the first time in months, she was safe. Even if she didn't yet know how long that safety would last. By morning the storm had thinned to a pale mist floating over the valley, but Clara's nerves had not settled with the weather. She half expected Elias to tell her, in his quiet, steady way, that the road had cleared and it was time for her to be on her way. She had prepared herself for it, folded her dress neatly, packed her worn suitcase, and sat on the edge of the guest bed waiting for the inevitable. But when she stepped into the kitchen, Elias merely looked up from the stove where he was frying eggs and said, "Sit. Coffee's ready." No dismissal, no polite suggestion, just a simple invitation, offered like she belonged there. Clara sat hesitantly, fingers curling around the warm mug. The children trickled in one by one, sleep-mussed and bright-eyed. The littlest girl, Lottie, climbed right into her lap without asking permission, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Clara froze, every muscle going rigid with startled uncertainty. Elias glanced back from the stove. "She don't do that with just anyone." A flush warmed Clara's cheeks. After breakfast, Clara insisted on helping. She washed dishes, swept the floors, and stitched up the torn sleeve of the middle boy's shirt. It felt good, doing something useful instead of drifting like a ghost through someone else's life. The children buzzed around her constantly, chattering, tugging at her skirts, asking questions faster than she could answer. "Where are you from? Why were you in the storm? Is your favorite pie apple or peach?" Clara laughed more in that first day than she had in years. Elias watched quietly from the doorway as she braided the older girl's hair. There was a look in his eyes, soft, contemplative, almost disbelieving, as if he couldn't quite understand how a stranger had slipped so seamlessly into the life of his home. "You're welcome to stay another day," he offered that evening while she dried dishes. Clara paused. "You've already been so generous." "Road's mud," he said, glancing outside. "Wagon'll sink if you try moving on too soon." But the truth settled between them unspoken. The children didn't want her to leave. By bedtime, they were wrapped around her like vines clinging to a trellis. The eldest boy, Daniel, followed her with the loyal attentiveness of a young man who'd shouldered too much responsibility since his mother died. The twins, Emma and Henry, scrambled to sit closest to her at supper. And little Lottie refused to sleep unless Clara tucked her in and hummed that same lullaby Clara hadn't sung since her husband was alive. One day became 2, then 3, then a week. Clara's presence transformed the house. Laughter floated through the halls again. The children's bickering softened into playful banter. The table felt full, not just with plates and food but with warmth, something the family had been missing since the day their mother's voice went quiet. And though Clara tried desperately not to feel too deeply, she felt herself sinking into the rhythms of the home. Sweeping floors, kissing scraped knees, mending loose buttons, sharing smiles across the supper table. Her heart stirred in ways she had long believed impossible. But every night, alone in the small guest room, she reminded herself, this is temporary. Elias was kind, but he didn't know the truth about her. No decent rancher would keep a woman who couldn't give him more children. And certainly not with 4 young ones already needing so much. One evening, as Clara swept the kitchen, Elias stepped through the doorway, his hat in hand. He wasn't a man who spoke more than necessary, so when he cleared his throat, Clara knew he'd been thinking on something. "You work harder than anyone I've ever seen," he murmured. Clara smiled lightly. "Work keeps the mind steady." He nodded, taking another hesitant step inside. "The children sleep easier with you here." Her breath caught. "I'm glad I can help." Elias rubbed the back of his neck. "House feels different. Better." His voice dipped lower, rougher. "You planning to move on soon?" The question struck her like a blow. She tightened her grip on the broom. "I don't want to overstay. You've given me so much already." "You haven't overstayed," he said firmly. "Not even a little." She opened her mouth, to tell him the truth, to warn him before he learned from someone else, but before she could speak, little Lottie waddled in, eyes half closed, clutching her rag doll. "Ma," she mumbled sleepily, reaching for Clara's skirt. Clara froze. Elias froze. But the child didn't correct herself. She toddled closer, wrapped her small arms around Clara's leg, and repeated it softly, trustingly. "Ma, Ma." Clara's heart cracked open. Later that night, with the house still and quiet, she sat on the edge of her bed, hands trembling. She had been called many things in her life: widow, burden, barren, cast out. But, Ma, that word tasted like hope. Like something sacred, and it terrified her. Because once Elias learned the truth, surely that word would be ripped away again.